I'd like to welcome everybody back to LitBros podcast, Lit is in Literature. My name is Anthony Benway, and I'm your host for tonight.
My name is Audrey Castillo.
My name is Santiago Miller.
My name is Johnny Hayes.
My name is Bryce Patterson.
So let's begin. Our topic is purpose in society, and if everyone would just like to start by introducing their project.
I wrote about my literary analysis paper on Far from the Madding Crowd by Thomas Hardy. A lot of good themes we could take away, especially from the role of women in society, how if they can be strengthened and uplifted to higher planes than what men can achieve, and how to level the playing field as well in a prominent 1800s European society.
Sounds good.
What was this question?
Just introducing your project.
Oh, so my book is Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro. My thesis is about him intentionally allowing the readers to empathize uh, with the characters. So that way, by the end of the book, when he slowly reveals that the main characters are actually clones, that way the readers actually feel for them and not just think that they're just not real and not humans and that they're part of the society. Um, so yeah, that's my main point.
Mr. Hayes?
Well, I wrote my paper on Sherlock Holmes stories by Arthur Conan Doyle, specifically the Hound of Baskervilles. So my paper follows a theme of Holmes' superiority in the terms of intellectualism, which prevents him from embracing his own faith, that emotion and deeper human connection. Um, there's a relating theme of skepticism throughout the whole book that I've kind of deciphered a little bit. I also contrast Holmes and his partner Watson as to go with emotional thinking versus reasonable thinking, which is two forms of human intellectualism. Um,
My book is Kin by Rudyard Kipling, and my analysis paper describes how imperialism and colonialism critically shaped the conflict in Kim, his personal identity as whether being Irish, Indian, because he was, though born natively in Ireland, he was really raised up in India. And the whole novel goes back and forth on which identity he, you know, connects with more, whether that be his one that he was born with or the one that he actually grew up on. And our topic question is how people relate to society.
My project is on Shakespeare's Tempest, and what I argued about this book is that Shakespeare is trying to teach the younger generation how to interact with the world. It's an ever-changing world, especially during that period with the Elizabethan era ending, with colonialism was just beginning to spark off, and how that he wants the youth to approach the world with the arts and literature. That's what I explore in my book.
Okay.
Just real quick, just so everyone is clear, I just want to make sure everyone gives a very brief summary of their plot.
So in my book, Far from the Madding Crowd, there is this woman who was given a farm estate, and in that estate was not normal during the time because farming was, especially owning a farm, was a very male-dominated thing. That's one of the topics that my author Thomas Hardy discusses about is breaking societal stereotypes, and with that, there comes our main character Gabriel Oak, who is in falling in love the moment he meets the farm owner named Bathsheba Everdeen, and ever since then they've been trying to get married, but also in the way there are also other suitors, two of them being uh, this character named Boldwood, who is also a worker in Bathsheba's farm, and Troy, who is a soldier. ultimately Boltwood and Troy died at the end of the story.
Thank you.
Tragic.
So and Never Let Me Go follows the life of Kathy H, which is the main character, a young woman who looks back on her childhood at a strange and quiet boarding school called Helsham. She grew up with her friends, Ruth and Tommy, and they live a fairly normal life at first, learning, making art, and being told that their health is very important in their life. But as they grow older, they slowly discover the truth that they're clones, created for the purpose of donating their organs to other people that need it more than them. Um, Even though they try to live a normal life and have hopes and dreams, their futures are already decided for them by the people that work at Helsham. Kathy becomes a carer. She takes care of people that are from Helsham and they're donating the organs. And Ruth and Tommy begin their donations earlier, and eventually Kathy looks after them too uh, when they're donating. Throughout the story, the characters struggle with love, loss, and the desire to find meaning in the life and that society that treats them as less important or as robots and not humans. Um, and Kathy tries to hold on to her memories and the people she loves, even though as everything around her changes and doesn't allow her to be the person she wants to be.
Great.
Great story, great story.
Well, I'm actually going to start off my summary with a question. Have any of you watched Scooby-Doo?
I have
Many times, many times.
fantastic
I have-
program.
I have-
Fantastic
Yeah.
program.
Yeah.
For chance. Well, my story, Sherlock Holmes, is the foundation of all mysteries to come. Um, Specifically the normal plot point of how um you don't really know who's the perpetrator or the villain until the very end, but there's clues left. So the mystery itself follows a story of a spectral hound which haunts a family, the Hound of the Baskervilles, and Sir ah, Sir Arthur, not Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, but Sherlock Holmes and his assistant are sent to um hey buddy.
There's a bug on the set. Oh my
Bug
goodness.
on the set. What are we gonna do?
It's okay.
Um but those two are sent to solve this mystery by the one of the newer members of the Baskerville family, as an older member had been killed by the spectral hound, and it follows kind of a theme of, is something supernatural or is it real, throughout the story, and that's where his skepticism really comes into play, and how Sherlock really logically thinks through things in order to solve this mystery. There are a few shortcomings along the way. I won't spoil the whole thing, but in the end, they do catch the guy. But
Interesting.
yeah,
Very interesting. Mr. Patterson.
So Kim opens with Kim living in India as an 11-year-old boy, just living his life, completely free, not bound by any responsibilities. But throughout the book, we start to see that his freedoms are taken away. He first encounters a character called the Lam, who he connects with very deeply at the beginning and agrees to go on his spiritual journey. The religion that Rudyard Kipling kind of incorporates into Kim is Buddhism, and it's a very important factor for the plot and for his personal identity and the things that he hopes to achieve throughout his journey throughout the book. So he initially agrees to go on this journey to reach this spiritual place called the River of Styx, where the Lama, who is just normally that title is a teacher, normally with a Buddhist connotation, and both the Lama and Kim seek this fulfillment of self-enlightenment, which is the goal for most Buddhists. Now, throughout this journey, he actually is delivering a letter for his father because he was heading in the same direction. And he comes across a British Army officer, which is where how I incorporate the colonialism and imperialistic ideals, because, at that time of in India, where the British controlled most of that area and heavily affected British culture and the overall development of the country. And so he was stopped by this officer, and of course, him being born in Ireland and that English side, he was more white. Now, despite living there for most of his childhood years, was still white, and so the army officer was still able to decipher between a local born Indian and him, and so they immediately picked him up and they put him in the back of the van and drove him to the nearest army base. And they, lo and behold, found that he was actually descent of some Irish heritage, which they didn't know. And so they immediately sent him away to the Xavier School, which is where that idea of freedom is being taken away. And at this point, he starts to have that internal battle of what identity he belongs to.
Mhm.
And he's tussling with himself and not knowing which one he truly belongs to. He actually leaves the Xavier School and finds the llama again. At this point, the llama kind of had just been roaming in the hills of the Himalayas, kind of searching for Kim because he didn't know what happened to him. And he was different. He wasn't as elected before, wasn't as engaged in his Buddhist identities because, in some sense, the school kind of brainwashed him in those English ideals. And through that, there was a pro and con for each identity. There were benefits for each that he found out. After this, he was picked up by the British Secret Service, who saw his dual heritage and being able to speak the language and knowing all of India's customs at that point, and saw him as a viable asset in a confrontation known as the Great Game, which is a large, pretty much proxy war to England and Russia. And it was this, in Kim's book, or in Kim, it was the spy game. And so Kim was pretty much a spy for the British and would go on these missions. And when I was reading the book, I was thinking to myself that, he would hate this and he would just leave. But Kim actually finds a sense of identity, something that his Indian identity kind of was lacking. And throughout that, the British part slowly started to rise to power, and his two identities really became equal. Though he was still continuing his journey with the llama and eventually they made it to the river of Styx. And in the end of the book, he realizes that he doesn't have to choose between these two identities. They can actually coexist. He can both be with the llama and be with him spiritually. And this whole spiritual part was his Indian identity, while still being a British spy and feeling like he was doing something greater than himself, which is another large aspect.
I feel like I know the whole story now.
Yeah.
So my book, quite parched.
What? We're in for a good one.
It's rushing.
Sure. And what?
Sponsored.
All right. So getting into the Tempest. It's about it's a play, short play, about a man named Prospero who once was the king of the land, and he is outcasted to an island where he's trying to get his position back. And at the start of the book begins with a storm that we later, very shortly later, reveal was caused by him. And the book kind of follows a path in which Prospero is controlling everything in supernatural kind of ways in order to set up his plan, which is get his daughter married to a prince that was on a ship that was shipwrecked by the storm that he caused. And basically, so tragic. All the divinations are Um, sorry. So basically, all the divine appearances and all the supernatural stuff is caught by Prospero, and he's using it to get his way. And Shakespeare kind of paints his character as very good or some sort of divine figure. And I think that's just indicative of how he believes that people can interact with the world. And I think that the supernaturalist is the metaphor that he's using for the arts and literature, how you can use them to kind of control the plot. So with that, everyone ready to dive into the question? Or
Of course.
should I just-
Excited.
Yes.
I might have even more questions after this.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
More about his book.
Actually,
Are there any questions left?
I just had a question for Sandy. Do you think he's playing to an idea of karma and of how somebody's actions can affect somebody's life overall?
Impression.
Great question. I need to think about this.
Double curveball.
I definitely think there's karma because actually the person who if I describe this a little bit more, Prospero was once the king, and he left his duties to his brother because he was very immersed in the studies of the spiritual arts, which is how he controls things, right? And his brother feels as if like Prospero's doing nothing, and I didn't need him in the first place, so he kicks him out. Right? And surprisingly enough, his brother is related to the person that he's trying to get to his daughter. So I feel like there's karma in that sense. Um, there's definitely other characters that we see with karma. Caliban, a native of the island that he was outcast to. It shows some very demon-like behaviors and never really succeeds. So I think he
So
does
definitely
yeah.
presence of
presence of
spiritual
spiritual
aspects.
aspects, and that's actually something I wrote down. Especially I want to get to Johnny about kind of the spiritual aspects versus real later.
Okay.
But so that's the first question.
Yeah, we can start this one.
Okay, so the first question: how do your authors use outcasts and outliers to tell a story to convey meaning? Want to go first?
I can actually start it off.
Really sure?
Yeah.
Start. Go ahead.
All right. Well, Sherlock Holmes is first glance a legend. Everyone knows his name.
Really?
Absolutely. Do you not know his name?
This is the first time I hear it.
Really?
We need to get
Well,
you
someone's
alive.
living under a rock. Well, with a legendary status comes an equally outlying part of society. And although there are some obvious pluses to that, there are actually, in my opinion, many more negatives, especially in Sherlock's case, in extreme intellectualism, where he is able to decipher every single situation he is in and cannot live a minute of his life without thinking everything through. Just sounds great. Until you want a wife, until you want friends, or until you're interacting with anyone.
Mm.
There is no real connection. No real connection whatsoever.
Mhm.
If everything you say is fabricated, everything you say is completely and utterly messing up the words here. But yeah.
It's okay.
I think that's a good point. You know, people in some cases are really good at, in Sherlock Holmes's case, like solving mysteries, something was very good at, unparalleled for anybody. But when you look at it differently in a social aspect, you know, back to our topic of society, I think that the way you were describing it, he's definitely an outcast, like the question.
Yeah.
And I think that's really crazy on how you have this like dichotomy that they may be really good in one field but completely different in other. And
Specialist.
right. And I think when in the mystery realm, people are like, oh no, he's the best one. He's not an outcast. But when you look at like How many friends does he have? Like maybe thoughts?
Maybe one. Maybe
Right.
Watson. And
And
even then, it's fabricated. There's parts in the book where he completely lied just to solve a mystery. That is his closest friend, and it is completely shattered. It's us.
I want to bounce off your argument next about the outcast and society because it is the people that make up the society. And I like your point about real life, and that where it gets into my book about how that's the owner of a farm is a female who is owning a farm, and that means she's outcasted from the rest of the male patriarchal society that was brought up in our book, in my book especially, in the setting. And so that leads to
What is the time period again?
this is 1800s Europe.
something completely unprecedented.
Completely
it's higher.
unprecedented, where the inheritor of the farm is a woman. You know, that's nobody really thinks about that in 1800 years because the eldest son would usually run the family. But this goes into the romantic aspects where suitors were a big part in how like people were in society was like formed, how the elites chose theirs, but now it is three men who choose to be the suitor of the woman. And I think that in my book, Thomas Hardy is saying that women can be of high status too, but especially in the working force, where in real life, and especially in today's modern day society, we have lots of trailblazers and women that have changed the world.
Powerful. Exactly.
Do you slight question?
Yes,
sir.
of course.
Do you think that the suitors are trying to use her for her inherent wealth?
I think there was a part of it because she was a very successful businesswoman, but it was also the fact that she was objectively attractive in the eyes of the suitor as well. So imagine having a pretty wife as well as a booming farm business. I feel like anybody would love to be.
What man would be that?
Yes, I do think it's part of the factor, but it's also how it's still 1800 years. You want to go for the best looking woman. It doesn't matter if she's, well, and from my interpretation, if she's able to do these normal household skills, because you could be able to teach that.
Yeah.
But you can't really teach back then. It wasn't really hesitant for teaching women how to run their own farm and their own business at that.
Self-built.
Self-made, of course.
Self-made. It's very powerful.
Going off what you said, I mean, I feel like in my book, I have more people that are being outcast because, like I told all of you at the beginning, my characters are slowly revealed at the end of the book that they're clones. So I feel like Kazu Ishiguro is making them like the outcasters because he shows how humanity and society puts them apart from them to make it seem like they're the problem of society.
I find that very interesting, actually, since they are clones. That's a inherent part of your book.
Yeah,
Yet they are still outsiders when they are one alike.
Are they machines?
Yeah.
That's what I don't understand because, like the book tells me, it goes with full on details that these people have emotions. They can think of themselves. They can, but I mean, they can feel things.
I do think AIs are a common theme in Ishiguro's books.
Yeah.
And I feel like that is not just a singular thing. I think a lot of things kind of dive into that, like man versus machine. And there's a movie that just came out called The Creator.
Oh,
Yeah.
Great movie.
And it kind of explores if like this man versus machine is one subordinate to the other, and is one capable of feeling the same emotions of the other. And I think there's definitely through any competition of anything, there is a feeling of outcast. And you can find that theme in pretty much any aspect of society.
and sorry, but I think it's very intentional what she's doing. Like, what makes a human a human? What makes them a machine? Does it matter? If they're feeling emotions, sorry.
And the book there's this woman called Madame who supposedly is the woman who comes to the school, Belgium, to collect their art that they do at the school. And she takes them and puts them out into the world to show how they really have souls. Because for some reason, the art that they do comes from their heart. And yeah, and this way she is trying to show humanity and society that these are not just people that um, are there to donate their organs, but also that they should have a normal life like anybody else because they have souls based on the things that they do.
Well, this is just a question for the table here. Do you think man versus machine, the machine doesn't necessarily have to truly be a machine, but could still be a person itself? Like, you know how you go through your entire life and there's just some people who just fly by like clockwork. Do not question a thing. And do you think that is an aspect in some of your guys' books where there are some people where it's almost mechanical the way they act?
I have a perfect response to that. Have any of you played or heard of a game called Detroit Become Human?
I have. Fantastic game.
So that dives completely into your question where these kind of clones, human clones of Santa's book, they're called androids, and they're like your personal servants, like real replicated people, but something in their program made them become deviant and deviate away from their instructed purpose, and they start to have a mind and likeness and thinking of their own. And I think that if these like machines were to have uh maybe like some type of soul within them, as long as they're like not trying to, take over the world, you know how they say, AI is gonna kill us all, stuff like that. I just think if we can like build a society where everybody, no matter like what you are, we can be equal. So that's what I
Last question before we move on. Uh, do you think that just because they're androids, but they act like humans, do you think that's bad for society, or do you think they can contribute?
I think that's a very interesting topic because I think they definitely could contribute. I mean, we see this already now. We have things like ChatGPT that can help us through problems with artificial intelligence or to operate certain procedures. And I think we're definitely getting those benefits. But there's still that question of, I feel like it will get to a point of like, do they have rights? Are these people? Right?
especially
They're
And
people now.
but
right. It's like we'll have to eventually ask that question, and I feel like it's a slightly dangerous question of like, well, we're gonna you put a definition on people on why they have rights, and theoretically, in some capacity, you can relate that to AI, and then you start thinking of like, well, maybe they do have rights, and are on the same playing field as people, and I feel like that goes down a very dark rabbit hole.
How far are we willing to go for efficiency?
Mhm.
And I think
Yes.
that's a perfect way to summarize that point there.
Yes.
all right, this is my
Let me address this question for my test, and then we'll move on. Sounds good.
okay.
So in my book, I believe there are actually two main outcasts. The first, the obvious one, is the devil-like character Caliban, who lived on this island all by himself, and Prospero was outcast in a strange place. And he's a very like demon-like character. Even in the book, it explicitly describes him as a devil. And I feel like what makes him an outcast particularly is that he doesn't know how society works. He's away from society, and he really has no morals. In the beginning of the book, he even attempts to Prospero's daughter, who's trying to marry out. He attempts to kill Prospero, and he attempts to rape his daughter. So
Wow.
no morals at all, right? And I think
That's a turn.
there's two sides of this coin, right? So one is the outcast that knows nothing about society and has no morals, right?
Mhm.
And then there's second, the main character of the book, Prospero, who is brought to this island, always, diving into his books, always in his own kind of world, right? And he's the type of outcast that he knew society at one point, and he's trying to get back into it. But the way he does that is through books, of course, through the spirits which he learns from through the books, through deliberate action. And I think that especially goes in with my thesis that people using books and things are the true people that contribute to society, that endows themselves with the art and with literature. That's what makes up society. That's where the people that succeed. Ready to move on to the next question?
Yes.
Very nice. Okay, second question. How do authors deal with characters finding or inheriting the purpose? Is there a conflict between fate and free will? Anyone want to start?
So you said inheriting their purpose.
Inheriting.
Now, that plays in directly to my point. My female lead that she inherited the farm. And what did you say about fate or free will?
Is there a conflict there, or is it really clear?
I think my book establishes the fact that she was up for the job, and this is something that's like breaking the societal bounds. And I think it is also it is her free will and her fate because it was inherited. That's what I think. But sometimes you have the case where characters will reject what they were meant to do by, let's say, older family members, maybe like inheriting like a restaurant, let's say that. But this is like a business where you can make a lot of money, and I think she finds her purpose in that too, because sometimes like a person when they're coming up through their life, all they know is just one singular thing, and they're not exposed to anything else. Like Frankenstein, how dude was just in the maps and the navigation. If correct me if I'm wrong, but you guys remember the
Yes.
yes, okay,
yes.
all right. Yeah, it's kind of like that, but
Specialization.
specialization, exactly.
Exactly.
Yes.
That was a theme we had talked about a little bit earlier.
Yes, and I think once a character experiences more of the outside world, their free will start to engage more, which also conflicts with their fate. But I think the two can coexist at the same time.
I agree. That kind of like unbiased, like when you are non-specialized in your access to one, you kind of have that unbiased free will. And I think my character is very similar to how Audrey explained it, of how there's a little bit of both and that, and I think they can coexist because Kim, he chose to do these things. He chose to stay with the British. He chose to stay in India and continue helping the Lama. But in some way, that was also kind of his fate. And I think you can play with both of these as being kind of the same coexisting. I think that's a really important aspect of, I think all of our book says that seems apparent.
In my book, the characters already grow up with their purpose being set for them throughout their life. Like they're supposed to donate their organs, and after donating, they're supposed to die. So that's something that they can't control. So they don't have free will to choose what kind of life they want to
So
have.
you're saying it's their fate,
Yes, it's their fate.
not
They don't-
chosen by them.
Just
Yeah,
because
Their
they
free will
by
can
the
only do
system.
so much.
Yeah.
They created by the system.
Yeah.
because they don't get to pick what kind of life they want. They inherit this role just because they're clones. This brings up the big question of fate versus free will. Even though Kathy and Tommy, some of the main characters try to believe there might be a way out of this, like getting a deferral to delay the donations because they're in love, or other things that they find out later in their lives, but the system is set and they can't escape it. So to me, that's fate. And the book shows how sad and frustrating it is when people are trapped by a fate that they didn't choose. And it makes us think about whether we really have control over our lives or if some things are already decided for us and we just can't do anything to escape it or try to delay it or anything like that. So that's my main point in that.
That's very powerful. I actually have a very interesting response to this because of the nature of Arthur Conan Doyle. Uh, in the story of the Hound of Baskervilles, the Hound of the Baskervilles, Sherlock Holmes and his other stories as well, extremely intellectual, which I've obviously said before. There is very little mention or very little evidence suggesting he has any belief in fate. It is all up to chance, and he will find that chance. It is the reason why that's so controversial is because Sir Arthur Conan Doyle is a very renowned spiritualist, which goes against that thinking altogether. It's very Victorian in nature for Sherlock Holmes.
Mhm.
Fully on logic and reason. And it's almost like he's a warrior for justice. That's his chosen goal. Um and I'm not even sure, because at least in this story, which is the one I read, he's already been a detective. He's already renowned, the top of the world, one of the smartest men. Even in the book, it is mentioned verbatim. You are you are like one of the smartest people in Europe.
Mm.
That is an insane statistic.
Yeah.
But whether I know it's free will or purpose or fate, it's a strange issue. Because I really wanted to know what Arthur Conan Doyle was trying to say. Quick little refresh.
I love that. I'd love to hear about your fucking stand.
Um,
The free wills with no morals.
Yes.
Yeah.
well, I'll kind of circle back to what Mr. Castillo was saying and about specialization. I think Shakespeare is kind of showing both sides of the issue, right? Caliban, of course, good at nothing. He just lives his life on the island and has like no goal, no purpose, right? And no fate really. And that's why with his free will, he chooses to do the wrong thing. And it reminds me of someone that we're in the government class that is also very related to the very early American colonization period, which is Thomas Hobbes and his theory that in nature people are inherently evil, and I think Shakespeare kind of predicts that almost in a way. And then you have Prospero, who of course he's always in his books, and that's the reason why he gets kicked out of his island. So specialization is too bad, and in that way, even though he was specialized, I feel like Shakespeare's taking a stance that one, it's kind of better because he was able to realize his mistakes and kind of come back to society.
Do you think anybody plays to that people are inherently good? Literature by, more John Locke.
Characters that I see are good. Really? Honestly, no.
Really.
And inherently good. That's very interesting how there's none.
I think that's very interesting because a lot of people think that in movies or books or any sort of literature, there has to be this good and evil. And really, that's not true. You can have good stories with good plot lines where people are just simply less bad than the other person. And I think it's very interesting. But I also like to bring up is Santi's point about society and the system, because we we see, especially in our society, on fate and will, is that we have systems that are created by society that force others to have not a choice and for it to be more just this will happen. And I think that is fully created by society and something that is really important. All our books, I think we all have examples of that, especially in mine, where the society is the English and their colonialism in India of controlling the people there and forcing them and not having free will and them being pigeonholed into a way of life and how they have to act.
So I actually have a question on that. So we talk about free will, and Catholics are taught that humans have intellect and free will as two important powers that make up what a human person is. And Catholics are also taught that humans were made very good. This was quoted in the Bible, Genesis.
The only thing. The only thing.
Yeah.
Yes.
The only thing that was made very good. And this contradicts Mr. Anthony Ameneme's book about the Tempest, about how people are intrinsically bad, and that also plays against Thomas Hobbes' theory about how people are bad. I just wanted to know. We also have discussed the supernaturals in our book. My character Bathsheba, directly named after King David's wife. That he had to get the soldier killed. Yes. So I just wanted to ask, like, what kind of religious stances are your authors taking? I know you have the Buddhist aspect, supernaturals. I feel like I could get a lot about you too. So what do you guys have to say about that? Religion, and especially in society where religion could be integrated into society.
Yeah. Yes. I think that your character, Dave Bathsheba, was definitely no mistake.
Yes.
There's that kind of undertone of maybe what the character represents, the ideas that they're portraying. I don't know if you could expand more on that. If anybody else has any more examples in their books.
Oh yeah, I actually do. So in my book, it is the devil is mentioned many times as a almost not as a figure, but someone who the devil's will can act through someone.
Okay.
So I found that very interesting in the fact that one, Sherlock Holmes himself, it is not clear if he believes in God or if he believes in any sort of religion, as he intellectualizes through everything. And he may not even think that a God can be real, which is a very clear flaw in his intellectualism. That brings me to Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, who I believe the character is more of a mirror of his own beliefs. Maybe he did this as a way to explore another side of him and to grow as he's a. You have to be very smart to write a very smart character.
That's true.
But he himself, at a young age, was a Catholic. He came from a very strong Catholic family, went to Catholic school, and something happened along the way where his faith faltered. He became agnostic. I think this was more in the graduation around that time. So past his primary education in his Catholic school. But becoming agnostic is a massive point for the author, who later became a spiritualist. I think it's very interesting that there is mentions of the devil when the author doesn't believe in a definite God, but still says there's evil. It's like it's the incarnation of evil itself.
One thing I want to say is that you guys are making my job as monitor very easy, very lively discussion so far. But if anyone doesn't have any comments, we're ready to move on to the next question.
Perfectly fine.
Great. Okay, so number 3. Are there characters who manipulate, deceive, or lie? And how does the author perceive those tendencies? And I actually kind of want to go first this time and kind of address
Go ahead, sir.
Audrey's question about how Shakespeare's taking a stance and calling people inherently evil, right? And I think it's especially interesting because this book is written in a time period where the King James version of the Bible was starting to get printed and was very wide distributed. So very religious, time period. And I think by taking his stance that, people are inherently evil, Caliban, who has no society, who's this very, I guess you could call him Adam-like figure in the sense that he's alone, chooses evil, right? And I think that's important, especially in relation to my thesis, that people without art, without literature, you're gonna be led astray. That you need these plays, the books. You need to read and immerse yourself in the texts, human texts, the Bible even being one of them, but that you need a
Bible's divine as well. Can't
divine.
forget that.
Uh, but that is a part of integrating into society. But then he also warns not to overdo it. So I think that's very interesting.
Yeah, the arts are definitely a backbone of a society. That is very clear, of course. Especially in our modern day where the arts are kind of being pushed down a little bit. But you have something to say?
I think
You want me to
Something-
go?
something to say.
Yeah, I was gonna start, but it's fine.
Go
My
ahead.
bad, my
Floor's
bad.
yours, floor's yours.
I mean, in my book, I feel like there's a strong character that manipulates and lies to everyone, more to Kathy, which is the main character. And this person in character is Ruth. She's one of the friends of Kathy. Um, she often lies to everyone and also manipulates them in different ways. She often pretends to know more about the outside world than anybody else, but she really doesn't. And she lies about a job she wants to get to feel more important. So she invents all of these lies just to get people's attention. And I just feel like at one point she even tries to keep Kathy and Tommy apart because at one point they start to come to each other and deal with these emotions. They wanted to be together, but Ruth manipulated both of them where the relationship didn't work well. Even though she knows they care about each other. But later in the story, Ruth regrets what she's done and her actions and tries to make up for them. Um, but it's too late because at that point, she's already died because she's been donating too many organs. Uh,
Sorry.
you got a question?
Oh no, I was just gonna add something on.
Okay.
I was gonna say that you talk about how people lie a lot, especially for either their personal benefit or to degrade others, and I think that's something really prevalent in society when people will lie lots. And I know Johnny knows a lot about this, and do you want to expand on that?
Yeah, so actually, Sherlock Holmes himself is a great deceiver. Uh, yeah, with Watson himself, a very large part of the story, Holmes is not in the book at all. He's a side character almost, even though he is on the front page. He's the name. He's the name. But what it normally takes the narration of Watson um before later he returns back to the story. He tells Watson from the beginning to just take notes on the case while he was fixing something up back home in England. Well, they're still in England, but in London. Um, However, the entire time Holmes was there on the case because he did not want Watson to emotionally connect himself to Holmes and ask for help or try to reach out because he knows Watson is a very smart man as well and could find him if he wanted to. But Holmes did not want to be known on the case until the very end, where he had solved everything. And that is a great manipulation of his one true friend in my eyes.
Yeah.
And that is almost like the question I brought up earlier with machine versus man and how far you're willing to go with efficiency, where he threatens ruining his relationship with his one only true friend over a case, over something that with if they work together, it could still be solved. And I think it's very interesting that he chose to go the lone route, do it entirely his way, lie to everyone just to solve a case for his own pride. Okay.
It's very interesting because Kim, throughout my reading, I find out is actually the opposite. He wants something to belong to. He wants to be with people, and it's kind of weird too because he has this slight like aspect of having that independence where the people or he wants to have freedom, but still be connected with others.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people are like that, where they want to have this freedom, but they actually don't want to. They don't want to be truly alone in that aspect of doing everything for themselves.
Yeah.
And I think you guys have a ton of things to look at whenever you want to expand.
Well, for sure.
Actually, I was just finding very interesting circles around everywhere. So, um, in Santi's book, I find it one interesting that Ruth is also a clone, but also she's a friend of Kathy. She's a liar, and at first she's saying that her job is her worth, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then she's opposing love, the antithesis to love, right? And then eventually she comes to full circle. In Johnny's book, Holmes is very focused on his job as well. And he, instead of the antithesis to love as Ruth is for Kathy, he's kind of the antithesis to friendship between him and, I don't know his name, but it's one friend.
What was that?
What's his friend's name again?
Watson.
Watson, him and Watson. And I think that these authors are trying to say that putting your importance on a job, even though the job is kind of what we see in society as important, right? Like just getting a job, especially now, we're always caring about the money, of course.
Exactly.
Of course, of course.
It's the
But-
product.
The
The
product.
product.
Yes.
What
Product.
about the
But these people are the antithesis to love and to friendship, and we can see how it's kind of their downfall. So,
It's their downfall. They're the loneliest people. Part of my paper is fully about loneliness and how he is not able to form real connections.
Of course.
I actually have a question. Like, we've been talking about how these people are liars and manipulators and all this in our books, but how are they um, contributing to society or aside from society? Like,
Okay.
what is their role in society? Does anybody want to expand on that?
Well, I think manipulators are indeed harmful to society because they're gonna bring down like everybody just to bring themselves up. So what's the winning cost if you're above everybody else, but everyone else that you affected is suffering and can't and is not able to succeed? And
Except for that.
exactly. So society is like a team. We work as a whole, but what is one person trying to be the star of the show if nobody else is able to support that with other things and other elements that they're good at? But you use that element and burned it out. Like,
Yeah.
you guys get what I'm saying, right?
Yeah. I understand.
And I think this aspect is also kind of seen in the Bible, where Sherlock Holmes has that want to be alone and that kind of independence, but man is supposed to be not alone.
Exactly. Exactly.
That's why Eve was made, dude.
Yes, and I think that aspect of putting other people down is directly against that and is a bulwark against of what I think we should inherently do. And even if you take out the religious aspect or the Bible text itself, there's an inherent theme that you can see where people generally get along better when they're together. They can do things, harder things, quicker and to be done together. Like an example is the landing on the moon. Yes. Could one person do that? Probably. A, it would take forever. And B, you may not know everything that's required to be done. And so you need the help of other people to achieve a goal.
I have a very contemporary, extremely contemporary example of this. We had our day of service today at Bishop Byers.
Fun times.
Day of
Very fun times. Anthony and I were working in a forest, and for a fair bit of time, there was only a few people working on a select patch of invasive species.
Japanese knotweed.
Japanese nutweed,
Wow.
whatever that is.
Does that one.
We got a small patch done until a larger part of our group came, and we worked in solidarity with each other. The whole patch was gone within 20 minutes.
Wow.
It was incredible what
Teamwork.
exactly teamwork. And I'm not saying 20 people is a society,
Right.
but it is definitely a shrunken down version of
It's not much, really.
yeah.
Society.
Yeah, exactly. It's a good form of society.
And I'd like to just make a final point that I found interesting that Prospero manipulates in every aspect of the plot except for the love between Miranda and Ferdinand. So I think that's especially interesting how they're saying that relationships shouldn't be manipulated.
That's true.
Does anyone else have anything else to add?
No, we can keep going.
Very good. Okay, so the fourth question: how does the author question what it means to be human and what makes human life something of value? How do the protagonists or other characters treat others and evaluate their impact on the world? And I think we kind of touched on this earlier, but if you have anything to
I feel like Santi has good points on
I
this.
mean, I feel like my book. I feel like my book is perfect for this question because one of the biggest questions and never let me go is what makes someone truly a human? Because we're talking about clones in my book. The clones feel everything normal people feel. They love, they cry, they dream about the future, but society acts like that doesn't matter at all. Um, the book makes us wonder why being human seems to depend on things like birth, power, or status.
Yeah.
Why can't you just make a human and still be a human? Like nobody has asked that question. And Kathy, the main character, is kind and thoughtful. As a carer, she takes care of people. She makes sure that they're not in pain. She makes sure that she's there to support when they need it. So I feel like that really shows how human she is by being there for other people, not just her. Like an android wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
Like they will only have one person that they serve. But Kathy serves everybody.
Yeah.
So to me, that actually makes her a really important role in that question of what makes a person human.
Exactly. Did you have something with it? All right, and I'll hand it off to you as well. Uh, well, I think it's very important. Your story goes along the lines of there's another humanoid, which is more black and white. My book, it's all human, we think.
The devil.
The devil, apparently. But Sherlock Holmes, cannot see the humanity in other people because of his manipulation. He he demeans what it means. He demeans other people for his own growth, for his own pride of solving a case, being the absolute best, and he will do whatever it means, and that even means discounting his own friends, and that's almost inhuman of him. And my main point is that manipulators cannot see the humanity in others.
Mr. Moderator, if you don't mind, if you could articulate that question again.
Okay.
Let me just finish right now.
Yes, that's
Johnny had a very interesting points.
Yes, okay.
To reiterate, how does the author question what it means to be human and what makes a human life something of value? How did the protagonists or other characters treat others and evaluate their impact on the world?
Yeah, I think that Rudyard Kipling definitely explores this avenue of finding the boundary between identities. And Kim, throughout his journey, especially at the lowest part between discerning on what identity he was most connected to, was he didn't feel like a person. He didn't feel like he belonged. And I think that he definitely um explored this and was able to write about it very well because he himself, I think this is prevalent in many authors where they've used their personal experiences. I know Johnny talked a little bit about this on his author's personal experience and how that affects the book. But Rudyard Kipling, he grew up in India for a large part of his life, kind of like Kim, and was kind of able to articulate that theme of maybe not belonging and maybe not being a person in certain stances because you don't have that belonging, which I think can affect many people.
Yes.
I have one final follow-up question, which I feel like will kind of take our point to a concluding end. Well, now I just forgot it. But do you think what really makes a society is the humanity aspect. Because you said he didn't have a sense of belonging. When I heard that, I took that as he didn't see his humanity. He didn't see his own belonging within humanity.
Right.
And once he found his society, once he found his people, that's when he felt like himself.
Yes, I think that's very true in that societal aspect on how it's kind of the same and how that belonging in society, you being a person, finding that you have that sense of belonging, having that sense in society,
Yeah.
and then it kind of is secular, and then you feel like a person again.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's quite
Yeah.
clear too.
Tied together perfectly.
And I kind of want to relate this final point to something that we're all learning this year. We all are required to take a very enlightening class on theology of the body.
Oh,
And in that
yes.
class,
Shout out Mr. Digby.
And his not faith.
yeah, this stuff, baby. In that class, we explored the concept, the Christian concept that people are made for communion, right? And as Johnny very put it, what is inhuman is the loss of society.
Yes.
So it's
What
just
is
kind of
the
exactly reinforcing kind of that point.
People are not ends to
Exactly.
And I think that plays into my point, beautiful people aren't ends to me. So I think the relationships that men and women are meant to be in communion with each other. I think my book displays that perfectly between Gabriel and main character Gabriel and the other main character Bathsheba. But there are also the two other suitors, Boldwood and Troy, who I think, in my opinion, had ill intentions toward Bathsheba having a second, like a kind of a double timing her in the sense the intentions were not pure, and what we learned from theology of the body that love is like very pure and the connection of like two people together. So I think my author does well is show the intentions and also teach the readers how to love a person, and especially the type of person that is committed to their craft, who's committed to their business and their ambition, how we can treat a person. And I think what Hardy is teaching us is that we have to be patient with people. And, in the Bible, it always says, like, love your neighbor and, like, a bunch of good stuff. Book of Proverbs, a bunch of good stuff. And I think what we can take away with this is you have to have pure intentions for another person. If you want to build a family, if you want to love somebody,
strong society.
Strong society.
Society is a combination.
The society starts with the family. What you teach your family and your offspring and stuff like that.
They'll go out and they will affect society.
Yeah,
Exactly. It all stems in a family.
All right, so that sounds good for that question. We want to move on to our last question.
Of course.
Okay,
Close it out.
so our final question, we kind of also touched on this, just because it's just flowing so well, but are any classic relationships, such as the family, that's just one example, doesn't have to be just a family, that are maintained in a strange place or threatened by society? Does anyone have any questions?
I think Mr. Castillo could actually
Of course. I don't think there were any threats in society. You said such as family. What other points to that question?
Classic relationships that are, in the book being kind of threatened or challenged by society. So it could be just a family, it could be like men and women.
Okay.
Uh,
So I think the righteous and virtuous types of relationships that Aristotle mentions were not part in my book because everybody was trying to get the better of them to achieve the goal of marrying Bathsheba. Now, I think that is a threat into society itself because we are not supposed to use other people to be as our stepping stool to progress, but instead we have to bring each other together up because society is going to progress when we all progress as a group instead of a single person going ahead. And now, such as with family, it doesn't really get into the familial aspects because we don't know much about characters' backstories or like how they were brought up. Just occupations like Troy, who's a soldier, and kind of has a little bit of fun fact, being Troy and a soldier, battle tropes, battle, yeah, but I think it also gets a bit into a bit of the psychology of the characters as well. Troy fighting for glory. He thinks of Bathsheba as like trophy to his collection. That's also being like a glorious person. But overall, I think not a bunch of societal threats. It's more of just pushing the boundaries. Where can we go with this? I like playing within the lines, but expanding those lines.
Yes.
Stemming from my thesis on the effects of imperialism and colonialism. Now, in my thesis, it talks about Kim's identity, but I feel like it also goes to like the person and society, like the question. And imperialism and colonialism are bulwarks against that. And I feel, especially in this context, um, they will act as the separation between, in my book, between Kim and Alana. Their relationship is broken up by these factors, and in their closed amount, because in my book there actually wasn't a ton of character. There was a lot of dialogue and personal reflection, but the relationship between Kim and Alana was definitely um, broken in some aspects of and their own society. It was broken by imperialism and colonialism, and that definitely affects the outcome and their relationship with one another and what they do at the end.
So I feel like in my book, my characters are really born without parents. Since you all know, my characters are clones, so they really don't have parents. And they're raised by Helsham, which are the teachers from the school that maybe act like their teachers and parents, but it's not really the same since they're just trying to provide them the the things that they need to do their own fate, which is donate their organs. So they're not really trying to protect them, but they're trying to like hurt them in a certain way, if you know what I mean by donating their parts, obviously. Um, since they don't have real parents or siblings, their friendships become their versions of a family as a group.
Yeah.
Kathy, Tommy, and Ruth form strong bonds as they grow up, and those relationships help them get through hard times.
Yeah.
Like through the times where they have to donate their organs. So each one of them is there supporting the other one since they don't have anybody else that can come and visit them or say something nice to them, since they know that society doesn't really want them to be part of their environment.
Yeah.
But even those close friendships are put under stress by society they live in. So I feel like society plays a part where even though they wanna build relationships between each other, society has something to play in it where they wanna break it.
Yeah. I think Johnny has a great point to kind of finalize the question and really bring it home.
Okay.
Yeah. So my thesis itself is it really it explores the theme of pride and how it is the root of all of these issues. Every single one. Even though there's no real familiar bonds within my story, some societal aspects that are expected and should be there are honesty, um, loyalty, and trust. Those are big things that a society needs. And earlier I had talked about the devil as a aspect of my book, and the sin of Lucifer was pride, and I think that's how society falls due to pride.
Yeah. Kind of just closing it out. I noticed just like a closing thought. There are certain relationships that are needed and should be challenged onto, of course, the relationship of parents. The relationship of lovers should be pure, especially in my book, how I mentioned before, Prospero manipulates except for the relationship with his daughter. So mother and father again, and Johnny between friend and even in yourself. has been Bryce.
Yeah.
So I think that's a great point to kind of end it off with.
Yeah.
And I just want to thank all of you. A very lively discussion.
It's been a great discussion.
Bryce in particular helped a lot with the timing. Johnny keeping the conversation alive. Santi, your points very interesting. Very
Yes.
interesting book.
It was really
And,
nice to meet all of you.
And Audric,
Biblical ties.
different ties.
Just
So,
monitoring.
I feel like I learned new things by just by just listening to all your points and details that you have to say about those books.
I just got
and with that, we want to invite you to, depending on when you're seeing this, look forward for our next episode, which is Java with Jacobine, having a special guest.
Hit that follow button.
LitBros. Short literature.
It was nice to meet all of you.
Thank you. Thank you, Johnny. Thanks. Just,
Okay, you guys
Thank you.
ready to eat?
Thank you.